Welcome to another episode of Fresh Off the Set. I'm Brooke Mangum.
And I'm Carrie Hawker Diaz. Okay, this podcast today,
I'm starstruck.
He's like legendary, right? So I just think about like an amazing career if you picture that in the world of like acting and voiceover. And like you think of Chris Sarandon.
Yeah, and if you don't know who that is off the top of your head, he's Chris, it's Humperdinck. It's Prince Humperdinck.
Yes, from Princess Bride.
Yes.
Okay, so he was also the voice of Jack in The Nightmare Before Christmas. Iconic
I watch
role.
it every year.
Yeah, and like I feel like he plays like a bad guy in Princess Bride, but like he's a nice guy.
I was just going to say, he is like plays such an iconic bad guy in that movie. That's like my childhood. I've just started having my daughter watch that movie. It's so great. And he's so, you just want to hate him in that, but he is such a delightful, good guy.
He is. And he's so handsome. And I think about, like, we were just looking through his IMDb page and like everything that he's done over the years in his career. I think about like our careers, of course, like very different, but was there a changing point in your career? Like, what would you say, like, turned things around, or like, was there anything that you can think of?
Oh, I honestly, it's like every single day I'm like, wow, I get to do this. Like,
They
is
let me
anybody
in the
paying
building.
attention? But just, I would say there is such a different thing as aging and growing up in the public eye. I know you started doing acting and things like that at a young age. I was the same way, and like going through broadcast school. It was like kind of learning how to be a grown up in front of people. It's kind of an interesting facet of life, and then going into motherhood and things like that. And you're like, I still see myself as, I should be a lot better at this, right? I'm like, I should be an authoritative figure.
We should be better.
Be so much better at this.
I'm always amazed that the doors are unlocked when we walk in this building.
I know. I'm like, gosh, nobody's paying attention, are they?
But it is like experience. I feel like we are better in interviewers because of our experience and the life that we've been through, because we can relate to a lot of things that people talk about when they come on our show.
And talk about a crazy life that Chris has been through. He has been through the ups and downs in Hollywood, living in the public eye, one of the most like famous marriages and things like that.
Yeah, he was married to Susan Sarandon.
There you go. Just casually. Just one of the things he did.
Yeah. Well, should we get a listen?
Let's do it.
Okay.
We are so excited to be joined by the legendary, I am using that word correctly, Chris Sarandon, known for his iconic roles in The Princess Bride and The Nightmare Before Christmas. Chris is also the host of the popular podcast Cooking by Heart. Chris is here to dive into his impressive career, love of food, and life beyond the spotlight. Chris, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Laura. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
We are so excited to have you. And I am using, like, literally when I saw that we were going to interview you, I was over the moon. You have such a diverse and iconic career in both the film industry and voice acting. Looking back, what role or project do you feel most shaped your career?
Well, that's a very complex question. Because
I'm
the
starting
first
off
thing
difficult.
the first thing that I would say would be being a father and being a husband. 3 times being a husband and being a father of 3 kids and now 9 grandchildren. And shaped in the sense that they have always been my first priority. So. And I didn't obviously know that when I started, but that they would become that over time. So they have been the constant in my career in terms of decisions I make and the roles I take and the times I choose to be away from home and or not be away from home. But if you're talking about just, what's the play or what's the movie or the television show, it's probably the very first time that I played a lead role on the stage when I was in college.
I love it.
Because it set me on the path. It told me this is what your life is going to be. And it was a play by Molière, the great French comic playwright of 16th, 17th century. I'm not sure. At any rate, 16th, I think. At any rate, and it was a role called Tartuffe, and I got to wear a wig and a fake nose, and it was a very, very much a college production. But it was also the first time that I was out there, and God, this feeling, I've never had it before, and I want to keep having it for the rest of my life. This was the idea that this was going to be my career, and it wasn't about. It's never been about being famous as much as it's been about I want to do this thing that I'm doing now because it has such a profound effect on me and sometimes on others.
It really does. And I mean, truthfully, what you said first about being a father, I understand that I had a baby 10 months ago. And
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. And that role as a mother has shaped my career now and my life.
Absolutely.
And you also talking about college. Truthfully, I am grateful. And I know there are so many other people who have watched your work, listened to your work, that are so grateful that you shared your talents with all of us, because truly sharing talents and what you've done, the art of acting really can bring smiles to people's faces, can make them feel joy. And that is what you've done in your...
Thank you. I hope that in a small way it has. And I'm more aware of it. You and I were speaking before we started recording about the Salt Lake City Fan X, which I have attended several times. And I do occasionally go out and do Comic-Cons and do autograph signings and personal appearances. And it wasn't until I started doing these shows that I really had the profound and humbling experience of talking to fans and having them express just how important the work that I've been a part of has been to them. And how much it has affected their lives, and so that's an extraordinary experience. It's really quite something.
I love that. I mean, I look back to when I was younger. My little brother, he's taller than me, so I guess he's younger than me. I'll call him my younger brother.
Yeah, right, younger brother.
The effect that The Princess Bride had on my sweet little brother. Even
great.
To this day. And you did that. And I mean, not just that role, you voiced Jack Skellington in The Nightmare Before Christmas, and that role resonates with fans every single year. I mean, Disneyland and Disney World changed the Haunted Mansion to The Nightmare Before Christmas.
I know.
People are decked out in Jack Skellington stuff. You brought that voice alive to such a beloved character, like stepping into that.
Well, at the time, it was a job, essentially. I went in and I auditioned. They had already done the singing part of the movie with Danny Elfman.
Yeah.
And so I had the opportunity to hear Danny's performance as the singing Jack, as the musical Jack. And I went in and basically was, flown up to San Francisco once every, 6 months or so, maybe a little more often, to work with Henry Selick, the director.
Yeah.
One-on-one, almost always. The only time I had any other actor in the booth with me was Catherine O'Hara when she and I did Jack and Sally scenes.
Yeah.
But other than that, I was working solo with Henry and, getting the kind of, this, try it this way, try it that way, try it this way.
Yeah.
How about this? And then giving me a line reading. And it's very different. A very different experience doing that kind of work than it is, say, working on stage. But it's also quite thrilling because you get to kind of fly with the character. And so it was a wonderful experience while it was happening. That is, when the process was occurring.
Yeah.
But there was no way to know exactly what the result of it was going to be.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, well, what was it like? I mean, like you said, you did a lot of work, by yourself in a booth, but what was it like working alongside people like Catherine O'Hara and Danny Elfman?
Well, I never worked with Danny.
Oh, okay. Just hearing him sing?
Yep. Just heard the voice. And in fact, didn't meet Danny until, about 6-8 months ago when we did a Comic-Con together. And actually, I had met him many years ago when the movie first came out, or shortly after the first came out, and Tim was receiving an award and couldn't attend and asked me to accept the award, and Danny was there.
Yeah.
But I didn't actually meet him. But he and I got a chance to, chat and hang out a little bit, and we had a great time. As far as Catherine's concerned, she's, Catherine O'Hara is one of the extraordinarily talented people around in any medium. So it was a joy. It was a joy.
So wonderful. And honestly, I can't imagine what it must have felt like to be like, this is a job. And then honestly, that movie just took off and is still so iconic to so many people. And it's turning, so Nightmare Before Christmas is turning 31 this year, and The Princess Bride is turning 37. What do you think it is about both of these films that make them so timeless and beloved by, audiences of all ages?
Well, I think with The Nightmare Before Christmas, foremost, are probably two things. First of all, the visual artistry of the animators and the extraordinary care that was taken to make the movie, and how when you watch it, there are literally in every frame, and it was shot a frame at a time.
Yeah.
In every frame, a new experience. Yeah. There's something new visually going on. There's another character who enters the frame that you go, oh my God, that one. That's just amazing. I mean, I love the character who plays the saxophone who says "Bone Daddy." There are just so many wonderful visual jokes in the movie. There's so many. And then I think more importantly in terms of what the audience connects is Jack's search for identity. This guy this creature who doesn't really know what his place in the world is and is trying to break out of this kind of hidebound, life of just being the king of Halloween, the Pumpkin King.
Yeah.
And what else is out there? Where am I supposed to be in my life? And it's interesting because I just experienced a panel where I talked to the audience, the people who came to talk about the movie, and that was one of the things that I basically said to them: who here hasn't had that experience in their life? Of wanting to know wait a minute, I've been doing this all my life up to this point. Is this what I was meant to do? Is there an opportunity for me to try something else? Yeah. And if so, is that the right thing to do? Is it a good idea to take risks? Monumental risks in Jack's case by changing everything about him to be, becoming Sandy Claus. I mean, insane, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's that search for identity that I think so many people identify with. I have so many young people who come up to me and say, "This character has been so important of my search."
I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I know so many people who, family members and friends who love him for that very reason. And it's so amazing that you were able to bring that to life. And I think it's when someone sees what they're going through on screen, it immediately connects them. And you were able to do that for them.
Well, thank you. And as far as The Princess Bride is concerned, I know that when I first read the book many, many years, this was way back when, my ex-wife Susan had been given a copy of Goldman's book by Robert Redford. She was working with Redford on a movie called The Great Waldo Pepper. And she and I were going off on a little vacation because she was exhausted from the movie, and I'd just finished doing a play, I think. And at any rate, we were taking a little vacation, and we both read the book and just flipped out over it. And then many years later, I hear that there's a screenplay of this book and that Rob Reiner is going to direct it, and I'm going to go in and audition for it. And I was just beside myself because I loved my first exposure to it. And I think what audiences connect with that movie is that there's this thing that William Goldman, a master of, which is mixing cynicism with romance.
Yeah.
And here's a movie that can have a line like, life isn't fair. Anybody who tells you any different is selling something. That's such a profoundly cynical point of view about life on the one hand, and yet counterbalancing it is the most perfect kiss ever in history. And this extraordinary kind of ability to move back and forth between those two polar opposites, and at the same time, there's so many indelible lines of dialogue in the movie. And there's so much humor, there's adventure, there's sword fighting. I mean, it's got so much.
Yeah.
And I have so many people who tell me, when I'm feeling low, that's the movie I go to.
Yeah. And I know that That is my little brother. And I don't have many memories of growing up where he wasn't quoting The Princess Bride. And he took a sword with him everywhere we went. Well, obviously it was fake, but still.
And the key, the balance that William Goldman straddled with Rob Reiner's help in his approach direction is that while it has fun with certain tropes that we're all familiar with, the adventure tropes, the romantic tropes, the cynical ones as well, that balancing it is the fact that it's all taken very serious. I experienced that when I auditioned for the movie. I went in and they asked me to do the scene where Buttercup threatens suicide.
Right.
And Humperdinck says, I hope you'll consider me as an alternative to suicide. Yep. Well, that line exists on so many different levels. And when I said the line, Rob Reiner guffawed. He was out of his mind laughing, right? Yeah. And I looked at him like, what are you laughing at?
What is wrong with you?
This is a very serious moment.
Yes.
And then I realized that's the key to the tone of the movie.
Yeah.
And that is that you don't make fun of it. You have fun with it, but you don't make fun of it. Everybody's, that comedies, this is a famous line with comedians. Comedy's very serious business.
Yep. And I love that. And honestly, it like I said, that movie, I don't know what my little brother's life would have been like without that movie growing up. It shaped him so much.
Lovely.
So much. And so, we've talked a lot about, obviously, your acting, but right now, what people are just loving from you is your podcast, Cooking by Heart. It has been a huge success. You've had some incredible guests, from different walks of life, from the stage to film. What inspired you to start this podcast?
Well, this was pandemic. And I was sitting at home. Nobody was working in the movie business and the stage business anyway. We weren't able to. And so my brother-in-law, who is a big podcast fan, he and I were talking one day, and he was saying, "What are you up to?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm languishing, basically. I'm doing a little writing." And he said, "Why don't you do a podcast?"
Yeah.
And I said, "What? Why would I do a podcast?" And he said, no, listen. He said, "You're Greek. You cook for us all the time whenever we're together. Your father owned a restaurant. Do a podcast about food." And I thought about it. I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And I started listening to a number of podcasts about food, and they were all great, but nothing connected to me. And then suddenly I literally grew up in a restaurant. My father owned a restaurant in a little coal mining town in West Virginia, and I worked in the restaurant from the time I was like 9 years old until I went away to college at various, and I started back in the kitchen, worked out front and I opened the restaurant sometimes in the summer with my uncle. And so I thought, well, I'll talk to people about their experience when they were young with food. What was it like in your home? What was it like around the dinner table? Was your mom a great cook? Was she not? And it's not about the food specifically so much as it is about the stories. It's about the people. And it's about the relationships. It's about the community that food creates. So that's really what the genesis of it was. And it's so interesting to me that every time I sit down to talk to somebody and I think, oh, I don't know, it's going to be anything here, there is always, the stories come out. Yeah. I like to use the example of, people tell me going in, they say, the food was so terrible at my house, I don't want to talk about it. and yet, I had as a guest, one of my first guests actually was Michael Patrick King, who's a wonderful showrunner, writer from Sex and the City, and Michael's a comedy writer and has great stories about growing up. But the food was so bad, he said the only time there was any flavor in the food was when my mother cried in the mashed potatoes.
Oh, no.
Well, that line gives you so much of a picture of what that story is.
Yeah.
In his house, what the relationship was like between his mother and his father, what it was like around the dinner table was obviously not terribly much fun. But everybody's got a story. Sometimes the stories are wonderful. They're voluptuous. The food's fabulous. The stories are amazing. I just did one with Phil Silver's daughter, Nancy Silvers, who's a very successful screenwriter and television movie writer and showrunner. And she talked about her mother was from the South. Her father was Jewish, so she ate in a deli sometimes. And at home, her mother made grits and fried chicken.
I love it.
And the food stories were hysterical. People literally stopping on their lawn in Beverly Hills and making lunch with tour groups who were going around to movie stars' homes.
Amazing.
They would stop at their house and eat lunch on their front yard.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, you said this. I have a saying. I mean, being in the field I'm in, everyone has a story to tell, and everyone's story is worth telling.
Yes,
is what
absolutely.
I always say. And I mean, when it comes to food, I have so many memories. The minute you talked about that, I went back to when I was younger. My grandmas are generally pretty good cooks, and then my grandma was a caterer. So
wow.
I grew up with, I was so spoiled growing up. And then my mom got my grandma's cooking. I did not.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So I didn't.
Yeah, I get a lot of grandma. Yeah, I get a lot of grandma talk. Yeah, about how influential grandmas were in terms of the food in the house and what was served and how. Well, anyway, yeah.
I love that.
I get it. Yeah.
So amazing. And I mean, you've talked about a couple of episodes, but what have been, some of your most memorable ones?
Oh gosh. That's like saying which of your children is the most interesting.
What's the first one that comes to your head?
I've gone from, as I mentioned, Michael Patrick, comedian, Mario Cantone, the casts of almost all the movies I've been in, the memorable ones. I've done, episodes with them. I've done episodes with my wife, Joanna. I did one with her. I did one with my kids, all of whom are great cooks. The chefs, particularly, I guess, I think if you're thinking of one memorable one, it would be with the great Jacques Pepin, who did a live episode with me here at the Sacred Heart University Theater, and the idea that here's a man who really brought French cuisine to America and then refined it over the years that he's been active, and has become the touchstone really for great fine dining going forward from the time he came to this country, and is still active in his late 80s, with his television show on PBS, but at the same time maintaining this kind of humility and is the most humble, extraordinary gentleman that you'd ever want to meet, and at the same time, this protean figure. It was an extraordinary experience and one that I will remember forever. Yeah.
I mean, I hear that name and I immediately want to be at the table where he's cooking food and serving food. I've had
Alice Waters was a guest of mine. She was the final guest of last season. Lydia Bastianich, who's a great Italian chef who created Italy, the mega Italian stores that are all over the world.
I know it well.
Yeah. So I've been really fortunate in that regard.
Oh, that is so amazing. And I mean, and it all sounds so delicious. Like I think of all these people and everything they've done and the stories that goes with it.
Oh, and talk about stories. I mean, Jacques' story, for instance, that's the other thing. Grows up in wartime France. His mother forages for them because his father's in the French resistance. I mean, it's like from a great biopic.
Yeah.
His life has been, it's just been amazing. So many wonderful, again, it's the stories.
Yeah.
It's the stories.
And stories are, what connect us. And that happens whether it's through a podcast or acting or food. Stories are that common thread that connects, all of the human race together.
Yep.
And how blessed are you to be, in so many different aspects of storytelling, so many different mediums.
Yep.
Oh, I love that. And you, I mean, Chris, you are, I think you're 82. You don't have to say yes or no. You show no signs of slowing down. What motivates you to stay so active, both creatively and personally, acting and the podcast? You keep going. What motivates you?
It's interesting. One of my daughters, very much into the family history, has hooked me up with an online thing where you get questions about your past. Right? And one of the questions was, what has been your life motto? And I thought about it for just maybe 10 seconds, and I just went, and I said this out loud to myself. I said, remain a moving target. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I don't mean that it's about bad things befalling you and having to avoid them. It's about whatever comes in your life, that you remain improvisational, that you remain nimble, that you remain willing to learn and curious, and also curious about not just things in your own life, but in other people's lives. And I think that's what kind of drives me, is that from the time I was a kid and trying to, we're back to this whole theme of the Nightmare Before Christmas, but I was trying to forge an identity as I was growing up, because I was the son of an immigrant and in a small town in West Virginia, in a coal mining town, and there weren't people around like my parents. And so I only was striving to be somebody else. And so once I came to a point in my career where I thought, this is what I want for the rest of my life, my identity was forged, but it was forged by my earlier attempts to fit in, to understand what other people needed, what other people wanted. And now that I've gotten to a point where I'm a bit older, the same kind of things are kind of operating. I'm curious about stuff. I'm reading constantly. I'm gardening. I have a huge garden that I've been working. I've been gardening since I was in my late 20s, and with a friend who taught me everything I know about it, and then sort of learning as I've gone along. Now I have a huge garden that I work every summer, spring, summer, fall, and the podcast, and my grandchildren. I have 9 grandchildren.
Love it.
So, and they keep me nimble and inquisitive, and I have such a full life, and I have so much love in my, probably the most.
I think having love of yours so very, and I think that quote of yours is brilliant. I love that, and I mean, speaking of that quote, gardening, everything, how important your family is to you, which I love, and I can relate to that. I have this new identity as a mother, and it's been beautiful and challenging and rewarding, all rolled into one. What is next for you, both your career and personal life, because they're both so important?
I don't know, but whatever it is, I look forward.
I
have no idea what's next. No idea.
Want to be like you when I grow up, Chris. And to be honest with you, I don't know if I'm ever going to grow up.
That's the other secret. That's the other secret, I think. I'm still that kid. I'm still that kid from West Virginia.
I think our inner child never really leaves us, and I think
it shouldn't.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people try to sublimate it, but it shouldn't.
And I think that is one of the reasons I have so much fun with my baby boy, is that I'm still, that little kid at heart.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and watch and listen to them too.
Yeah.
They're the creators. They're the ones who live a life of not really worrying about what anybody else thinks. But just doing. Oh, yeah. And they just wear their heart on their sleeves. And I think if we could all be as genuine and unashamed and open as kids, things would be, a lot better off. So, Chris, I have absolutely loved talking to you. Really fast before we wrap up, where can we listen to your podcast, Cooking by Heart? All you have to do is go to chrissarandon.com, and on the website are the links to all of the audio platforms and to the YouTube, because I record everything on video as well. So you've got, you can watch shows, you can just listen to shows in the car or on your phone or whatever, or you can watch and listen on your phone, whatever you choose to, or you can just look up Cooking by Heart and you'll go directly to the link.
I love it. Well, I look forward to an invitation for you to cook for me, since everyone's saying you're such a great cook. I'll be waiting for that.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Laura.
It's been such a joy talking to you, Chris. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, and we will catch you next time.
Congrats, you made it to the end. If you want to continue to freshen up your day, you can watch us on Fresh Living every weekday on CBS Channel 2 in Utah at 1 o'clock. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel, KUTV Fresh Living, and follow us on social media. We will see you next week.